The fluorescent lights of the conference room felt like they were burning into my skin. I had spent 9 years at Summit Solutions, sacrificing my weekends and family dinners to build this company's reputation. I looked around the table at my team, expecting a normal strategy meeting. Instead, my manager, Mallory, leaned back in his leather chair with a smirk that made my stomach drop. He didn't look like a leader. He looked like a predator. Before we continue, Derek said, his voice dripping with fake politeness, "I have a big announcement. We're making some personnel changes to move the company forward." The room went silent. I felt a sudden, sharp chill in my chest as Derek's eyes locked onto mine. He didn't even have the decency to pull me aside. "Elena, we've decided to let you go. Effective immediately." The words hit me like a physical punch. I looked around the room, seeing my colleagues freeze in total shock. Derek gestured toward Bradley, a junior who had only been here 6 months. "Bradley will be taking over your accounts. Security has already packed your desk." He was erasing a decade of my life in these seconds. I couldn't breathe. The humiliation was a heavy weight on my shoulders as I stood up. My legs feeling like lead. I noticed Ian Walsh from Parker Industries sitting in the corner. He was our second largest client, and I had personally managed his account for 3 years. He looked horrified, his face shifting from confusion to pure anger as he watched Derek fire me like I was yesterday's trash. Derek didn't even notice Ian's reaction. He was too busy looking pleased with himself. I walked out of that room in a daze, the hallway lights blurring as I moved toward the exit. My desk was already empty. Every photo and notebook was gone, replaced by a cold, wooden surface. The humiliation was a heavy weight on my shoulders as I drove home. My mind kept replaying the streak, look on Derek's face. How could he do this? My reviews were always perfect. I had brought in millions. As I pulled into my driveway, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something told me to answer. "Elena!" It was Ian Walsh. His voice was sharp and filled with a strange intensity. What the hell just happened in that meeting? I've never seen anything so unprofessional. "We need to talk, and we need to do it right now." I sat on my couch, still trembling from the shock. "Derek fired me, Ian. I don't even know why." I whispered into the phone. I heard Ian let out a frustrated growl on the other end. "Elena, you are the only reason Parker Industries has stayed with Summit for 3 years. Do they really think we're going to let a junior like Bradley touch our business?" I started to explain that it was out of my hands, but Ian cut me off firmly. "No, it's not. There's a clause in our contract you probably don't even remember. We have the right to approve or reject any leadership changes on our account. It's called key personnel approval." My heart skipped a beat. I remembered 3 years ago when Parker Industries had been worried about staff turnover. I had fought to include Clause 12B to give them peace of mind. I rushed to my home office and dug through my files until I found the original contract. There it was, printed in black and white. Summit could not change the account manager without Ian's written permission. Derek had fired me without reading the very contract that kept the company profitable. This wasn't just a mistake. It was a total disaster for him. Ian told me to meet him the next morning at his headquarters, and he made it very clear that Derek was not invited. I spent the night documenting everything, every save, every $1 million win, and every strategy one had built for them. While I was working, my old colleague Ashley sent me screenshots of the office Slack channel. Derek was already spinning the story, calling me firing a strategic transition, and telling everyone that I wasn't a good fit for the company's future. It was a lie, and everyone knew it. Bradley was apparently already panicking, realizing he had no idea how to handle a client as big as Parker. The next morning, I walked into Parker Industries. The building was a tower of glass and steel. Ian met me in the lobby, which was a huge statement to his staff. He led me into a room with the CFO and the head of procurement. They weren't just upset, they were finished with Summit Solutions. "We trust you, Elena, not the logo on your business card," the CFO said. They told me they were invoking Clause 12B immediately, suspending all payments to Summit until I was restored. I felt a surge of adrenaline. This was the turning point. While I was at Parker, Summit was falling into a state of total chaos. Ashley kept me updated via text. Apparently, Bradley had tried to join a project call, and Ian had kicked him off within 30 seconds. Derek was losing his mind, trying to understand why the client was refusing to speak to him. He didn't realize that by firing me, he had essentially locked the door to his own treasury and thrown away the key. By noon, Summit's VP of Finance was breathing down Derek's neck because $1.2 million in quarterly revenue had suddenly vanished from the books. Derek finally tried to call me that afternoon. I let it go to voicemail. He sounded desperate, his voice shaking as he talked about confusion and working things out professionally. I didn't give him a phone call. I sent a formal email instead, CCing Parker's legal team, telling him to read Clause 12B. The silence from my end was deafening. I knew that, at that very moment, Derek was looking at the contract and realizing he had just handed me his head on a silver platter. He had tried to destroy my career, but he had only managed to ruin his own. I felt a cold sense of deep satisfaction. The next morning, I got a call from Summit's CEO, Patricia Henley. She was a legend in the industry, tough, fair, and very direct. She asked to meet me privately, making it clear Derek would not be there. When I walked into her office at 2 p.m., the atmosphere was heavy. Patricia didn't waste time with small talk. "Derek made a catastrophic error," she said, sliding a legal notice from Parker Industries across her desk. "They're giving us 30 days to fix this, or they're walking away for good. I want you back, Elena. Tell me what it takes to make this right." I looked at her and didn't blink. I told her that Derek had humiliated me and that a simple apology wasn't enough. I demanded a vice president title, a massive salary increase, and most importantly, I refused to report to Derek ever again. I told her I wanted Bradley off my accounts and a direct line to her. Patricia didn't even hesitate. She agreed to everything. But even as we spoke, I realized I had another option. Parker Industries had offered to let me go independent and take them as my first client. I was standing at a crossroads between corporate power and true freedom. I told Patricia I needed 72 hours to think about it. I wanted to see both paths clearly. Over the next 3 days, I did my homework. I realized that if I went independent, I wouldn't just have Parker. Other clients I had worked with over the years were already reaching out, hearing rumors of my departure. The risk of starting my own company, Brooks Advisory Services, was shrinking by the hour. I was no longer a resource in a cubicle. I was a brand. The realization was exhilarating. For the first time in 9 years, my future wasn't dependent on a manager's bad mood. On the third day, Derek sent me an email. It wasn't a real apology. It was a notification that he was forced to apologize to the team and wanted to know if I would attend the meeting. He sounded like a beaten man. I decided to go, not because I wanted his apology, but because I wanted to close that chapter of my life in front of everyone who saw me fall. I wanted them to see me stand back up. I walked into the office the next morning, and the energy was completely different. People weren't avoiding me. They were cheering. The conference room was packed. People from other floors had even snuck in to watch the fall of Derek Mallory. Patricia stood at the front, her face like stone. Derek stood up, his face pale and his eyes downcast. He read a scripted apology, admitting he had lacked proper process and had undervalued my contributions. It was hollow, but it didn't matter. When it was my turn to speak, I didn't follow the script. I told the team that this wasn't just a mistake, it was a culture problem. You're only as safe as your manager's ego allows. I told them. The silence in the room was absolute. I could see my colleagues nodding, their eyes wide. I had voiced the fear they all lived with every day. After the meeting, 3 of the most talented people in the office pulled me aside in the hallway. They didn't ask me if I was coming back to Summit. They asked me if they could come with me if I started my own company. That was the final sign I needed. I didn't want to fix Summit's broken culture. I wanted to build a new one from scratch. My decision was finally made. I was leaving for good. That afternoon, I sent the emails that would change my life forever. I thanked Patricia but declined her offer to return. I officially accepted Parker Industries' independent consulting proposal. My last day at Summit was the day I was fired. I wrote, "I won't be returning." Ian's reply came in seconds. "Welcome aboard. Let's build something great." I felt a massive weight lift off my shoulders. I spent the rest of the day filing the paperwork for Brooks Advisory Services. I was officially the CEO of my own destiny, and I had my anchor client locked in for $6.2 million over 18 months. News of my new company spread through the industry like wildfire. Business journals picked up the story, highlighting the key personnel clause as a lesson for every executive. Derek's name wasn't mentioned, but everyone knew who this short-sighted manager was. Summit stock took a minor dip as investors worried about client retention. Ashley texted me that Derek had been moved to an internal role in a basement office where he couldn't talk to clients anymore. He was still employed, but he was effectively a ghost. Karma had arrived, and it was wearing a tailored suit. 3 months into Brooks Advisory, and we were thriving beyond my wildest dreams. I had hired Ashley and 2 others from Summit who were tired of the politics. We worked out of a modern, open-concept office that felt alive with energy. Parker Industries was our main focus, and the expansion project was going perfectly. Ian was so happy that he started introducing me to his peers at other huge companies. Suddenly, I wasn't just managing one account, I was juggling 4. My revenue for the first year was projected to be triple my old salary. One afternoon, I received a very strange email. It was from Summit Solutions Board of Directors. They weren't asking me to come back as an employee this time. They were asking for a strategic partnership. They realized they were losing more clients to me, and they wanted to pay my firm to handle their high-maintenance accounts. They were willing to pay my new consulting rates, which were 3 times what they used to pay me as an employee. I laughed out loud in my office. Derek had tried to save money by firing me, and now his company was paying me a fortune just to keep their clients happy. I negotiated that partnership with Summit with a very sharp pen. I made sure my team had total control, and that Derek Mallory was never allowed to even see our reports. Signing that contract felt like the ultimate victory. I was now a valued partner to the company that had packed my things in a box. We hit our 6-month milestones with Parker Industries ahead of schedule, saving them an additional $500,000 in operational costs. Ian was so impressed he invited me to speak at a major national conference on client loyalty. Standing on that stage in front of 500 people, I realized how far I had come. I told my story, not with bitterness, but as a lesson in value. Clients don't belong to companies. I told the crowd. They belong to the people they trust. I saw people in the audience taking notes, their faces reflecting the same realizations I had in my home office months ago. After the speech, I was swarmed by people wanting to work for me or hire me. My firm was no longer a startup. It was a powerhouse. I looked out at the audience and saw a few Summit faces. They weren't smirking anymore. A year after the firing, Brooks Advisory had grown to 15 employees. We had moved to a full floor of a downtown skyscraper. I was sitting in my corner office, looking out at the skyline, when Patricia Henley called me. She told me she was retiring and wanted to know one last time if I would consider taking her job as CEO of Summit. I felt honored, but I looked around at my own team, people who were happy, respected, and well paid. "I can't, Patricia," I said. "I've built something here that I love too much to leave." She understood. She told me that Derek had finally left the company. He had tried to find another management job, but his reputation preceded him. No one wanted to hire the guy who had cost his company their biggest account because of an ego trip. He was now working as a solo freelancer, struggling to find even small projects. I didn't feel happy about his struggle, but I felt a sense of closure. He had learned the hard way that you can't treat people as disposable and expect the world to keep giving you chances. My life was finally my own, and it was beautiful. 18 months after the transition, I ran into Derek in a local coffee shop. He looked different, tired, and much older. When he saw me, he didn't smirk. He actually looked ashamed. He asked if he could sit down for a minute, and I agreed. "And you a real apology, Elena," he said, his voice quiet. "Not the one Patricia forced me to give. A real one. I was insecure, and I took it out on you. I ruined my own life, trying to pull yours down." I listened to him, and for the first time, I didn't feel any anger. "Derek, I appreciate that." I told him, "But you should know that firing me was the best thing you ever did for me. It forced me to see that I was bigger than the box you put me in." He nodded slowly, looking at his coffee. He even asked if I was hiring, though he said it like a joke. I didn't hire him, but I did offer to give him a professional reference for a non-management role. I realized that being powerful meant I didn't have to be cruel. I had won the war, and I could afford to be merciful to my enemies. 2 years in, a private equity firm offered me $15 million for a 30% stake in Brooks Advisory. They wanted to take us national. My team sat around our own conference room table, a table I had chosen in an office I had built. We debated the offer for weeks. I thought back to the corporate greed at Summit and how it almost crushed me. I decided to take the investment, but only with a contract that protected our culture. I made sure my employees got equity too. I wanted everyone who helped me build this to share in the wealth. The news of the investment made headlines in all the major business papers. From fired to $50 million, one headline read, "I was invited to guest lecture at the local university's MBA program." I stood in front of the students and told them about Clause 12B. I told them that being a good leader isn't about power. It's about being the person the client refuses to lose. I saw the same spark in their eyes that I had when I first started out. I was no longer defined by my firing. I was defined by my resilience, and it was unstoppable. 3 years after my departure, Brooks Advisory was a household name in the consulting world. We had offices in 3 cities and a reputation for being the most employee-friendly company in the business. I received a letter from a professor at a top business school. They had turned my story into a formal case study. It was now being taught to future CEOs as a warning about the cost of toxic management. Derek's mistake was literally part of the curriculum now. I felt a strange sense of pride that my worst day had become a lesson for thousands of others. I went back to the old Summit building one last time for a final partnership meeting. The lobby felt small and dated. I saw some old faces, and they all stopped to say hello. They told me the company was finally turning around under new leadership, but that they still used the Elena method for client relations. I smiled, realizing that I had left a legacy there that even Derek couldn't erase. I walked out of that building and didn't look back. I had my own tower now and my own team and a future that I had built myself. As we approached the 4-year mark, Brooks Advisory hit a massive milestone: $100 million in managed accounts. We were no longer just a boutique company. We were a serious competitor to the giants. I was featured on the cover of a national business magazine. The photo showed me standing in front of our floor-to-ceiling windows, looking confident and calm. The article focused on how I had turned a moment of public humiliation into a roadmap for success. My mother called me, crying with pride. She remembered the day I came home after being fired, thinking my life was over. One of the junior managers at Brooks, a girl named Monica, came into my office one day. She was nervous. She told me she had received a job offer from a bigger company for more money. I sat her down and didn't get angry. I told her I wanted her to be happy, but I also showed her the path I had laid out for her here. I gave her a raise on the spot and told her I valued her. She stayed. I realized I was becoming the leader I wish I had had at the summit. I was breaking the cycle. The 5th anniversary of the company was a huge celebration. We rented out a museum for the night and invited all our clients and their families. Ian Walsh stood up and gave a toast. "To the woman who saved my company $10 million, he said, "and to the woman who proved that loyalty is a two-way street." I looked around the room at the people I had worked with for years. We weren't just business associates. We were a community. I felt a deep sense of peace. The transition Derek had planned had finally reached its true conclusion. Later that night, I looked at my phone and saw a message from an old friend. Derek had moved out of the city and was working in a completely different field, real estate. He was apparently doing okay, but he was no longer the high-powered executive he once pretended to be. I was glad he had found something else. The industry was safer with him out of it. I realized that I didn't need him to fail for me to succeed. My success was independent of his downfall. I had outgrown the need for revenge a long time ago. And you were happy. By the 6-year mark, Brooks Advisory was being courted for a full acquisition by a global consulting giant. The offer was staggering, 9 figures. It would have made me and my early employees wealthy for life. We gathered in our conference room to discuss it. I looked at Ashley, Bradley, and the others. We talked about what it would mean to lose our independence. In the end, we decided to say no. We loved what we had built too much to let it be swallowed by another corporate machine. We chose the people over the payout. That decision only made our reputation stronger. Clients loved that we weren't for sale. We started winning contracts over firms this time our size because we could offer a level of personal commitment they couldn't match. I realized that the key personnel clause I had used years ago was now our biggest selling point. We weren't just providing services. We were providing a promise that the people you trust will be the people who do the work. It was a simple concept, but in our industry, it was revolutionary. We were changing the game. I was invited to return to Summit Solutions one last time as a guest of honor for their 25th anniversary gala. The new CEO, a man named Adrian, treated me with the utmost respect. He asked me to join him on stage as he talked about the company's history. He didn't shy away from the Derek era. He called it a period of unfortunate learning that led to a better understanding of what makes a company great. I felt a strange sense of belonging there again, not as an employee, but as a part of their history that helped them grow. After the gala, Adrian asked for my advice on a new contract they were negotiating. He wanted to know how to build in the same kind of protections I had used. I spent an hour with him, sharing everything I knew. I realized that by being open with my knowledge, I wasn't losing my edge. I was raising the standards of the whole industry. I left the gala feeling like a cycle had finally been completed. I had started at Summit as a junior with a dream, and I was leaving it as a mentor. It felt right. As I entered the 7th year of Brooks Advisory, I decided it was time to step back from the day-to-day operations and focus on the foundation I had started. We were funding education for young women who wanted to enter the tech and consulting world, but didn't have the means. I wanted to create 1,000 Elenas who wouldn't be afraid to stand up to a Derek. I saw the first group of graduates start their careers, and I felt more pride in that than in any million-dollar contract. I was building a future that would outlast my own career. One of our first scholarship recipients, a girl named Sophia, joined Brooks Advisory as an associate. She was brilliant, sharp, and fearless. Watching her handle her first client meeting reminded me so much of myself 10 years ago. I realized that the best revenge wasn't just my own success, but the success of everyone who came after me. I had turned a moment of darkness into a light that was now guiding hundreds of others. My story had become a roadmap for anyone who had ever been told they were disposable. 8 years in, and I was finally ready to retire. I handed the reins of Brooks Advisory over to Ashley and Bradley, who had become world-class leaders in their own right. The transition was seamless, not a Derek transition, but a real one based on years of preparation and trust. I knew the company was in good hands. On my last day, the entire office surprised me with a video of messages from clients we had served over the years. Ian Walsh was the last one on the screen. "You didn't just manage an account, Elena," he said. "You changed the way we do business." I walked out of the office for the last time, not with a box of my belongings, but with a heart full of memories. I drove past the old Summit building and waved. I wasn't the fired employee anymore. I was the woman who had built an empire from the ashes of a bad day. I realized that everything, the long nights, the humiliation, the risks, had been worth it. I had found my voice, and I had used it to build something that mattered. I was finally truly free. In retirement, I spent more time traveling and working with the foundation. I was often asked to give keynote speeches at international business forums. I always started with the same story: the day the fluorescent lights glared off the conference table, and my life changed forever. I told people that being fired was a gift. If you have the courage to see it that way, I became a voice for workplace equity and employee rights, helping to pass laws that protected workers from the kind of public humiliation I had experienced. One day, I received a letter from Derek. He was older now, and he told me he had retired too. He thanked me again for the reference I had given him all those years ago. He said it had helped him find a job that finally taught him what it meant to be part of a team rather than the boss of one. He seemed at peace, and so was I. We were two different people who had been linked by one moment of conflict, and we had both come out on the other side better for it. Life had a way of balancing the scales. Looking back on it all, I realized that the most important part of the story wasn't the money or the title. It was the fact that I never let Derek Mallory define who I was. He tried to tell me I was a failure, but I chose to believe Ian Walsh when he told me I was the reason they stayed. I chose to believe in my own work. That choice is what made the $50 million possible. It's what made the foundation possible. It's what made my life possible. I had learned that the only person who can truly fire you from your own potential is yourself. I sat on my balcony, watching the sunset over the city where I had built my life. I felt a deep sense of gratitude for every person who had helped me, and even for Derek, who had pushed me. My company was still thriving under Ashley and Bradley, and my foundation was changing lives every day. I was no longer the girl in the conference room. I was the woman who had turned a no into a never-ending yes. The journey was complete, and the view was even better than I had imagined. As the years went by, Brooks Advisory remained a top-tier company, but its culture was its true legacy. They never had a Derek again. They had built a system where everyone felt valued and where clients felt like partners. I would occasionally drop by for lunch, and the energy in the room always made me smile. It was the house that resilience built. I realized that my story wasn't just about me. It was about the power of a single person to change the energy of an entire industry. I had done what I set out to do. I had proven that you could lead with heart and still win. I spent my final years surrounded by friends, family, and the many people I had mentored. We often talked about the summit days, but it was always with a laugh. The pain of that firing had long ago been replaced by the joy of everything that came after. I had lived a life of purpose, and I had done it on my own terms. I knew that when people told the story of Elena Brooks, they wouldn't talk about the firing. They would talk about the flight. The final chapter of my professional life wasn't written in a contract or a news article. It was written in the lives of the people I had touched. On my 70th birthday, the foundation announced that we had reached our goal of funding 10,000 scholarships. Standing in front of those young women, I saw the future. It was bright, bold, and fearless. I realized that my story would live on through them. I had turned a moment of public humiliation into a legacy of empowerment. I looked at the horizon and smiled. The boring girl had done just fine. I closed my eyes, feeling the warmth of the sun on my face. I thought about the fluorescent lights of that old conference room one last time. They didn't feel bright anymore. They felt dim compared to the life I had built. I had taken the bricks Derek Mallory threw at me and used them to build a palace. My journey was over, but the path I had cleared was now being walked by thousands. I was ready for whatever came next. This year, they didn't ban me, they celebrated with me.